Welcome back to Horrorcast, the place where we provide you with real life horror stories and ghost encounters from across the world. So far, your response has been good, and we feel motivated to keep providing you real life stories from across the world. Some of you have also sent us messages, which we really appreciate. Your feedback is the most important thing for us. So, thank you very much for that, and this is episode 9. So without further ado, let's move to the story. This is gonna be a really spine-chilling account. I moved to Boston in early February of 2019 for a new job at a tech firm downtown. The place I found was a small one-bedroom apartment on Revere Street in Bacon Hill. It wasn't cheap, but it was older, built in the late 1800s, and that made the rent a bit more manageable. I didn't mind the creaky floors and narrow staircase. It had the old Boston charm, and being on the third floor gave me a view over the rooftops, especially when it snowed. At first, everything was normal. The neighbors were quite professionals. One was a nurse, another grad student at Suffolk. I mostly kept to myself, but within the first weeks, I started to feel off. Not sick, more like watched. It wasn't constant, just a strange pressure in the air. When I'd get home after work, I chalked it up to city stress or adjusting to new place, but it got worse. At night, I started waking up at exactly 3:13 a.m. every single night. No alarm, no outside noise, just me suddenly alert and freezing cold. The heat was on, but the room would feel like I'd left a window open. I started leaving a space heater by the bed, but it didn't help. One night around the second week, I woke up at the same time again. This time, I heard what I can only describe as dragging, like someone slowly pulling something heavy across the hardwood floor in the living room. I lay still, heart racing. I had dead bolted the front door. The hallway outside didn't creak, but I heard movement. I sat up and turned on the bedside lamp. The moment the lights clicked on, everything stopped. No sound, no cold, just silence. The next morning, I checked the apartment. Nothing was out of place. Windows were locked, no sign of entry, but a single glass on the kitchen counter had been knocked over. I didn't remember leaving it near the edge. I tried telling a coworker, Kevin, about it over lunch. He laughed it off, said I was spooked myself, living in an old Boston walk-up. I agreed, trying to move on. A few days later, I stayed late at work. Got home past midnight. The stairwell lights in the building were on timers and had already gone out. I walked up the steps by phone light. Just as I reached the third floor, I saw a figure at the end of the hallway. Just a few feet past my apartment door, a woman, very still, wearing what looked like a gray nightgown, hair long and wet. I stopped dead. She didn't move, didn't speak. I whispered, "Ma'am, are you alright? Are you looking for something?" And as soon as I did, the hallway lights flicked on, and she was gone. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want to sound insane, but that was only the beginning. Over the next few weeks, I started hearing voices, not full sentences, just fragments. My name sometimes, or a breath close to the ear. When I was home alone. More than once I came home to find the hallway lights outside my unit on, even though the timers had stopped working altogether. Then came the worst part. One night around 3 a.m., I woke up again. I couldn't move. I was frozen, staring at the ceiling. My body felt pinned to the bed. From the corner of my eye, I saw a shape by the door, tall, unmoving, head tilted slightly. The feeling of dread was overwhelming. I felt like I was suffocating under the pressure in the room. When I could finally move, I jumped up and turned every light on. Nothing there. But the bedroom door, which I always left slightly open, was shut tight. After that night, I started staying with a coworker on weekends. During the week, I'd go back only to sleep, if you could call it that. My health started deteriorating. I looked pale, I lost weight, I couldn't focus on work. Something was going on at the back of my head all the time. Eventually, I spoke to my landlord, Sarah, who owned a few units in Beacon Hill. I didn't want to sound crazy, so I just said I was feeling unsafe in the apartment, possibly a break-in. She was sympathetic but firm. Month-to-month lease, 2 months notice if I wanted out. Then she paused and asked, "You're in Unit 3B, right?" I nodded, yes. She hesitated, then said, "You're not the first person to ask to break a lease in that unit. The last two left early. Both said they kept hearing things." That confirmed it for me. I put in my notice, but it wasn't over yet. The last week in the apartment was the worst. I started having vivid dreams, if you could call them that. In one, I was standing in my own living room, but everything was slightly wrong. The windows were black, not dark, completely black, like voids, and something was in the room with me. Something or someone. I never saw it, but I felt it circling, whispering something. One night I woke up with deep scratches on my back. I lived alone, no pets, nothing. The morning after, I found those deep, angry scratches across my back. I sat in my kitchen for nearly an hour, just staring at the floor. I couldn't explain them. There were 4 lines parallel, starting near my shoulder blade and dragging diagonally across my ribs. They burned. The pain wasn't just physical, it felt familiar, like the echo of something I'd felt before. I was tired but not sleepy. It was the kind of fatigue that seeped into your bones, like your body would slowly give up on you. I began recording myself while sleeping. I propped my phone on the nightstand and hit record every night. I didn't know what I expected. Maybe proof, maybe validation that I wasn't losing my mind. The first few nights, nothing but hours of my tossing and turning. But on the 5th night, at exactly 3:13 a.m., the camera caught something. The room went still, and the sound on the recording changed, like a high-pitched whine that wasn't audible in real life. The blanket shifted slightly, and then the faint sound of whispering, not words, just breathy, hurried syllables, like someone trying to speak through gritted teeth. The whispering stopped after 40 seconds. But I didn't move during the entire time, not a twitch. That's when I realized I had experienced sleep paralysis, but not the kind where you'd wake up and can't move. This was different. I wasn't awake. I was trapped in a dream that didn't feel like a dream. Something was in the room with me. It didn't just pin me down. It was watching. Over the next week, it escalated. I began having walking hallucinations, quick flashes. I'd be washing dishes and see a woman's reflection behind me in the window, just for a second, then gone. I'd hear sobbing in the stairwell, but when I opened the door, the hallway would be silent. And then came the dreams, violent, disturbing dreams. One night I dreamt I was buried under the floorboard of my own apartment, staring up at the planks, unable to scream. Another night, I stood outside my building and saw a figure in my own bedroom window, looking down at me. I ran up the stairs into my apartment, flung open the door. Nothing. But the bed was warm, like someone had just gotten out. I stopped going to work. I couldn't focus. My boss was concerned, but I told him it was a health-related issue, which technically it was. I wasn't losing my mind. I started smoking again just to feel something in my lungs other than dread. Food tasted like cardboard. My apartment smelled like damp wood and copper all the time. One night, something new happened. I woke up again at the same time, of course, but I wasn't alone in the bed. I could feel the weight of something beside me, under the covers. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe properly. I remember trying to scream, but all that came out was a croak. The thing next to me began to whisper. It felt like it sang something along the lines of "You're mine." It felt like a blade pressed against my temple. The cold, the pressure, the words, it was like my mind was cracking. When I finally broke free and turned the lights on, there was no one there, but the imprints of a body remained on the other side of the bed. That was the night I finally reached out for help. I didn't know who to turn to. Therapy seemed pointless. I wasn't sure this was in my head. A coworker mentioned a man named Louis, who worked at a hardware store near Cambridge. Said he knew about energy, had helped people before. I was desperate. I visited Louis on a cold Thursday afternoon. He was in his 60s, Puerto Rican, soft-spoken but sharp. I told him everything. He listened without blinking. When I was done, he asked only one thing. Did you invite anything in? Did you give it permission? I couldn't understand what he was saying. I just said him no. He nodded slowly and said, then it found a crack. Sometimes these things find people, not places. Maybe you were just the next open door. He offered to come check the apartment. That night, Louis walked through each room silently, eyes closed, muttering under his breath in Spanish. After 15 minutes, he opened his eyes and looked at me. This is not your place anymore, he said. You need to leave. I asked if he could cleanse it. He shook his head. This thing doesn't want cleansing. It wants attachment. You've already been marked. My stomach turned to ice. Louise gave me a small pouch with herbs and some black stones. Told me to keep it on me all the times until I found a new place. I called my landlord again. This time, I wasn't subtle. I told her flat out that something was wrong in this apartment, and if she didn't release me from my lease, I'd go public. She caved, said she understood. I packed everything within 2 days. The last night, I stayed at a friend's place in Somerville. The next morning, I went back for one final check. As I stepped into the apartment, I felt it, like walking into a freezer. The lights flickered. I walked into the bedroom and there, scratched onto the inside of the closet door, were the words, "You can't leave." Those words were not very clear, but I could easily tell that there had been some scratches, and now the scratches clearly say you can't leave. I stared at it for a long time. Then I turned and left. But it didn't end there. Even after I moved into a new place near Jamaica Plain, I kept waking up at the same time. The dreams lessened, but the feeling remained. The pouch Louise gave me eventually turned to ash in my pocket one night. Literally crumbled into black dust. I called Louis. He came again, this time with another man, a kind of spiritual healer from Worcester. They performed a more intense ritual right there in my new place. Burned incense, sealed the windows, chanted. I wasn't allowed to speak. I just sat there holding a white candle. When it ended, Louis looked exhausted. He said, I think it let go for now, but it might look for another way back in. You can't go back to that street ever. It's been 3 years. I haven't gone back to Beacon Hill. I never walk near Revere Street. And I still check the clock if I wake up at night. Every now and then, I feel it again. A cold pressure, a whisper. And when I do, I leave the lights on. I think it's just now in my head. Thankfully, nothing intense has happened ever since. So, that was a really spine-chilling account. It gave me goosebumps. Before we continue to our next story, I would like you to please subscribe to our channel, like our video, and please give us your feedback in the comments down below. Also, share these stories with your friends and family. We really work hard to research, connect with people, and to present these stories to you. Also, if you have any real-life encounter, any paranormal activity or a ghost encounter, please share it with us. Send it through email, and we will share this encounter with our audience. Thank you very much. Let's move on to the next story. We lived in the quiet town of Asheville, North Carolina, a peace neighborhood edged with thick woods and whispering creeks. Our home sat on the far edge of Pine Ridge Lake, a modest two-story house with a wraparound porch and a large backyard where a black Labrador, Shadow, used to run around like he owned the place. Shadow was more than a pet. He was family. We had him since he was a pup, adopted from a rescue center just off Tunnel Road. My parents, my younger sister Ellie, and I had built our lives around him in a way. He had this strange intuition, always barking at people with bad vibes, always sitting silently beside us when we were upset, always staring at nothing for too long in the corners of the rooms. It started the week Shadow died. He had been perfectly healthy, just turned 6, and then one morning we found him lying stiff under the dining table. No sign of injury, no illness, just gone. The vet's autopsy came back inconclusive. They couldn't explain it. We buried him near the willow tree at the back of our yard, his favorite spot. Ellie cried for days. I did too. That was the saddest moment of our lives. The house felt different after that. The kind of quiet that's too quiet, as if the air inside had thickened. My dad, a complete skeptic, said it was just a silence left behind, but silence shouldn't feel like it's watching you. One night, about a week later, I heard footsteps on the stairs around 2 a.m. Everyone was asleep. I stayed frozen in bed, expecting it to be Dad going to the kitchen for water, but I never heard the steps go down. Just up. I opened my door quietly, only to find nothing there. The motion-activated light in the hallway was off. It shouldn't have been. Ellie started complaining about hearing barking in her room at night. Not loud, but like it was coming from inside her pillow. Then she said something was calling her name from the backyard. She was 8. She didn't make stuff up like that. Mom said it was grief, that maybe we were all projecting our sadness, but something wasn't right. Then came the smell. The house started smelling like wet fur, usually in the mornings, strongest near the hallway where Shadow used to sleep. We thought maybe it was an old blanket or carpet, but even after shampooing the floors and tossing his things, the smell would return. It escalated quickly after that. Ellie came into our room crying one night, saying she saw a shadow standing at the foot of her bed. She wasn't scared at first, she said, until she noticed his legs weren't touching the ground, just floating, and his eyes weren't right. They weren't the warm brown we knew. She said they were pitch black. After that night, she developed a fear of sleeping. She'd scream if he turned off the lights. Mom tried therapy, but the therapist couldn't get her to talk. She'd just stare at the corner of the room. Some nights, I also started waking up, sometimes frozen and paralyzed. I could move my eyes, but not a muscle. Sometimes I'd see a dark figure crouched near my closet door, watching. Sometimes it crawled closer. I never saw a face, just a feeling of teeth, smiling inches from my ear. The next morning, I'd find scratches on my arms, not deep but fresh. My mom blamed stress. My dad finally stopped sleeping in their room and took to the couch, saying he felt oppressed in the bedroom. That's the word he used. Oppressed. That's when I knew even he was cracking. Things became worse after Ellie's birthday. She got sick out of nowhere. The doctor said it was stress-related, maybe psychological. She wouldn't eat, wouldn't talk, wouldn't even walk around without someone holding her hand. And the smell of wet fur, it was now in every room. One night, we heard a loud bang, like furniture being thrown. We rushed into Ellie's room to find all her stuffed animals ripped apart and thrown into the corner. She was curled up in the bed, eyes open in silence. On the wall above her headboard was a dark smear, like something had scratched at the plaster. It smelled metallic. My mom contacted a local priest. He came over, said a few prayers, and blessed the house. But halfway through, he said something strange, that he didn't think what we were dealing with was entirely spiritual. Something has been invited in, he said. and it's feeding off grief. That night, my parents slept in the room with Ellie. I took the couch. Again that night, I woke up, completely frozen. This time, the TV flickered on by itself, just static. The sound was deafening. The lights began to flicker as well, and I felt pressure on my chest, like something heavy is sitting on me. My eyes moved towards the hallway. I swear I saw a shadow, our dog, or something that looked like him. But it was wrong. Its legs were bent backwards, and its head was twitching like it was stuck on a loop. Then it charged. I couldn't scream. I passed out. In the morning, my chest was bruised. We made a decision. We had to leave. But selling the house wasn't easy, and we couldn't just walk away. So my mom contacted a spiritual consultant out of Atlanta who specialized in energy cleansing. This wasn't TV stuff. This guy didn't wear beads or robes. He had a military background, now worked in energy auditing for residential spaces. He came with cameras, EMF detectors, and a weird dog named Toby, who didn't bark once, just growled low constantly. He did a walkthrough, said the back hall, the one where Shadow slept, was a hotspot, said the readings were off the charts. He asked us one strange question. Did Shadow ever bark into empty corners? I told him yes, especially near the attic door. He went up into the attic alone, came down pale, said nothing for 10 minutes. Then he said, there is something here that isn't of the house. It was brought, something attached. Turns out, about 3 months before Shadow died, my dad had accepted an old carved box from a distant uncle who passed away. A keepsake, he called it. He'd kept it in the attic. We brought it down. The consultant wouldn't touch it, said it had markings that weren't decorative. They were warding symbols, meant to contain, not to display. The box was burned, per the consultant's instruction. That night, the house was the quietest it had been in months. I didn't wake up either. But it wasn't over. A week later, Shadow's grave in the backyard had been dug up. We never found what did it, who did it. We moved out shortly after. The new place is quiet, still in Asheville, near Lake Julian. Ellie's getting better. I have also recovered. Everything has went back to normal. But those things which happened with us, those we never can forget. So that was also a very chilling account. With sudden deaths, there is always, or most of the time, something attached. Something not right. And in this story, the sudden death of a dog really makes me sad. But as far as the paranormal is concerned, with sudden deaths, there are some strings attached. Sometimes there are some evil entities or some energies that have an associated presence with sudden deaths and accidents. Well, I hope you also like these stories, and if so, please hit the subscribe button and the like button on the video, and please give us your feedback in the comments down below. Also, if something has happened with you anytime, any paranormal encounter or something, please write it to us through email and we shall share it with the audience. We shall also be doing some live sessions ahead to connect with our audience and people and discuss about the supernatural and paranormal. So stay tuned for that too. That's all for today, and thank you very much for watching, and until next time.